So while the presentation is being set up, I'd like to just set the context that there are speakers who have talked about the need for excellent content, excellence in quality. That was one of the E's which was mentioned. And we also looked at, Professor Jain also mentioned about the need for training of teachers, because teachers otherwise will just take the textbook and write on the board. So those are two of the things that I'm going to address here. Okay, so without much ado, one of the things that we are focusing on is this concept of 21st century skills. So if you look at some prescription by UNESCO, the full description is given on the Wikipedia. The key thing is something called 4 C's. We have heard about 4 E's earlier. Now I'm telling you about 4 C's. So these are the 4 C's that are very critical for our students as they go ahead in life. Okay? Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So what we want to do is to figure out a mechanism to inculcate all these 4 E's, 4 C's into the curriculum. Okay? So this is what the requirement is, and what I'm going to show you is one example of where we have been able to do this successfully. Okay? So the idea here is to start early. So rather than talk about higher education, what we are starting at is at grade 1. So we started out with attempting to look at what is being taught in computer science in the schools across the country. And we found that most of the time the textbooks that are available in the market are completely skill based. They are full of these screenshots of various software and say click here, click there, and there is really nothing much more was being done at that time. This was so what we did is a bunch of us sat down and we wrote down a curriculum and wrote books which are now being offered to schools through a company that we have, which is also an IIT Bombay company called InOpen. So they also have a stall outside. So that's one reason why I can afford to be short, because you can get to hear more about Computer Masti in the stall. Okay. So the good thing is that we have released the books free for download. So if you're an individual user, you could just download the books off my website, and by now we have about 10,000 visits from 100 countries in the last 2 years. So this is what the book is about. And how do we achieve these 4 C's that we are talking about? So there are 3 basic things. One is called a spiral curriculum, which means that we want to keep on revisiting. Often in our classes, so what is the new thing that we want to do? Often we have these classes which are very, very compartmentalized. So students are not able to take what they have learned in one class and go forward. So what we do is we keep revisiting the same theme in greater and greater detail as we go higher up the classes. Okay? The second thing that we do is called thematic integration, which is that all the examples, so what Mr. Gupta was talking about localization, we do attempt to do as much of localization as possible. All the examples are from the context, and we also try to relate it to topics which are being taught in other subjects. And the last one, which is the pedagogic strategy, what we follow is called guided discovery, which has been shown by research to be a very powerful mechanism. Rather than just simply stand in front of the class and teach, the teacher is actually just a facilitator. So the teacher, instead of allowing the students to ask questions and giving the answers, it works the other way. The teacher asks the questions and the students have to give the answers. Okay? So the whole content is written as a dialogue between a facilitator, which is an imaginary mouse. These are these characters which you see at the bottom. The mouse and 2 children, Tejas and Jyoti. And Tejas and Jyoti explore the field of computers by being facilitated along the way. Okay. So this is just some more detail which I am going to skip. So how thematic integration takes place. For example, here the life cycle of a butterfly also figures as a lesson of creating a presentation of the butterfly, as well as creating an animation, actually doing the programming of the life cycle through a programming language that we use, which is called Scratch. Okay, so how does Computer Masti address the 4 C's? What do we do for critical thinking? So we have explicit chapters which deal with stepwise thinking, logical reasoning, how to gather information from the internet. People say that all the information is available out there. Today we don't need books, today we don't need teachers, everything is available, internet is available. This is a very common thing that we hear. But then do our children know how to search this internet effectively, how to gather the information, how to make sense of this information? So that is one thing that we take very seriously and teach through our books. How to synthesize the information, use mind maps to figure out how to present our information. The second C of communication, again we have exercises on planning, how creating newsletters, collaboration, again like the previous speaker spoke, we have a lot of group activities which are part of our textbooks. And creativity also we foster by having students to create digital stories of their own experiences. Again is a very localized activity. So one of the lessons is about a visit to the local national park. So the children are to take video cameras and take photographs as well as videos and incorporate it into a presentation which they give in the class. Okay? And that brings me to the last slide. So how do you want to equip our learners for 21st century skills? These are some suggestions. The key is to create good content. So there is a lot of content out there, like earlier speakers have also observed. But what is good content? That is the key. So what are the features? Some features of good content are, one is the information should be authentic. Okay? Often most content has this. The second is the focus should be on concepts, not just simply skills, skills are very temporary. When the version of Windows changes or the version of Linux changes, those skills are going to change. Okay? And we want to instill lifelong learning. The second thing is that we want to suggest effective pedagogy. So the content by itself cannot do anything. It's the teacher who takes that content and transacts it in the class who is actually achieving something, right? So the teacher also has to be suggested that, okay, this particular content you can do as a group activity, this particular content you can do as a hands-on, this particular content is better done in a lab. Okay, so it's not enough to just give all the theory and say that, okay, I wrote a great textbook and that's the end of it. That doesn't work. Okay? So suggest effective pedagogy is the second one. So we want to do more than information transmission. So there are all these guided discovery, active learning and all these mechanisms. The last 2 points which I was very glad to see Mr. Gupta also say, that we want to invest in teacher training. It is very important to invest in teacher training. So it's very heartening to hear somebody from the government also saying that we are going to invest in teacher training, and not just invest in teacher training but also have quality assurance mechanisms to ensure that we are reaching whatever benchmarks that we are setting for ourselves. Okay, there are more slides, but I'll stop here and let you off the hook. Thank you.